I'm Archer Sinclair, 68 years old, and I've spent my life working hard. Living quietly in a house full of memories. I've always been the steady one. The one who took care of everyone, my children, my home, my late wife's business. My son, Richard, always seemed more interested in climbing the social ladder, while my granddaughter, Amber, can't seem to notice anyone who isn't in the spotlight. Unlike them, I've never craved attention, but I've always felt like an outsider in my own family. They've never appreciated the sacrifices I've made, and I've come to realize they probably never will. Today, as I handed Amber a gift I spent months crafting, her sneering comment hit harder than anything before. "This gift looks so cheap," she said, laughing, and for the first time in my life, I saw the truth. I was no longer needed, not by her. Not by any of them. That was the moment everything began to unravel. I don't know how it happened, but by the end of the day, my house was no longer mine. Amber's voice still rang in my ears as I left the party. The echo of her laughter crueler than any words she'd spoken. I thought of the hours I'd spent on that tiny handmade gift, shaping every detail with stiff fingers, pushing past the pain of arthritis. My late wife, James, used to tell me, people don't appreciate what they don't have to fight for. I think she was right. It wasn't the gift they saw, it was the effort. The love, the sacrifice that meant nothing to them. I wanted to explain that to Amber, to show her the value of something made with care, but the words never came. Instead, I stood there, watching her toss my gift aside with a smile, surrounded by a room full of people who shared her coldness. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they should have as I drove back to the house. I felt the weight of my own helplessness pressing down. This house, this place that had been the center of my life for decades, now felt foreign. I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped inside. The air smelled different. The light from the chandelier was dimmer, as if even the house knew that something important was slipping away. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't welcome here anymore. But it wasn't until I checked my phone that the truth hit me like a blow to the chest. A call from the Realtor. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding with the ownership papers for your house." The voice on the other end said, smooth but cold, "You may want to take a look." I froze, the phone pressing against my ear. "What do you mean? I haven't signed anything." The Realtor's voice became strained. "There's been a transfer of ownership. A company has taken control of the property." The words didn't sink in at first. I was too stunned to respond. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My mind raced through every conversation, every meeting I'd had with Richard. He had always been too eager to help with things. But this wasn't just helping, it was something else. I tried calling him, but there was no answer. It didn't matter. I knew I wasn't a part of their plans anymore, and I didn't think they cared. The tears burned at the back of my eyes. But I refused to cry. I had to think. I had to act. This house was all I had left. The last piece of James. I couldn't lose it, not like this. I felt a sudden, cold pressure on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. My eyes darted to the windows, but nothing moved. The silence in the house felt suffocating, unnatural. I stepped toward the desk, my hands trembling as I searched for the documents. The house, the place I had built my life around, was slipping away, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Then I noticed something, a faint watermark on the paper, barely visible, but enough to make my stomach twist. The signature was mine, but I hadn't signed it. The phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the Realtor, it was Richard. "Dad," he said, his voice almost too casual. "We need to talk about this. The house. It's already in the process of being sold." My heart dropped into my stomach. I knew, he knew, they all knew. "I didn't sign anything, Richard," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't agree to this." He sighed, almost as if he were bored. "I thought you'd understand. This is what's best. Dad, let it go. You've held on to this place long enough. It's time to move on." I didn't know how to respond to that. My own son, telling me to let go of everything I had worked for, everything I had loved. I had given them everything, my time, my energy, my heart, and now they were taking it all away. I hung up without saying another word. The house had already been sold. I had already lost, but I wasn't going to let them win this easily. I could hear the laughter from Amber's party still echoing in my head. It was the sound of betrayal, the sound of the life I had built being torn apart. And I knew that I was no longer just fighting for my home, I was fighting for my dignity. For everything I had given to this family that had turned its back on me. And they would regret underestimating me. I turned around and looked at the desk again. At the papers, the lies, the betrayal. The house was gone, but I wasn't, not yet. The doorbell rang. It was the realtor. I stood frozen in the foyer. The phone still pressed to my ear. The realtor's voice was soft, apologetic, but the words were sharp, slicing through the fog of disbelief that clouded my thoughts. There's been a transfer of ownership, he said again, slower this time. The house was transferred to a corporation earlier today. Archer, you're no longer listed as the owner. I could hear the faint buzz of voices in the background, but it didn't matter. My vision blurred as the walls of my home seemed to close in around me. This house, the place where I had raised my children, where James and I had built a life together, was slipping from my grasp. You must be mistaken, I whispered, my voice trembling. I haven't signed anything. Archer, I'm sorry, but this is official. I'd suggest you take a look at the papers. I can't help you anymore. The call ended, leaving me with the deafening silence of the house around me. I stared at the receiver, willing it to ring again, hoping for some explanation that made sense, but nothing came. I walked slowly to my desk, where the forged documents now lay in a neat pile, mocking me. It didn't feel real. How could this be happening? I was no fool. I knew that my family, specifically Richard, had been pushing me to sell for months. But a part of me always believed they were just suggestions, benevolent attempts to help. Now I saw the truth. They hadn't just pushed, they'd planned. I scanned the papers again, my fingers tracing the signature line where my name appeared. Bold and clear. It was mine, but I hadn't signed it. I hadn't even agreed to any of it. The familiar sound of my front door creaking open made my heart jump. I looked up sharply, half expecting Richard to walk through the door with that calm, condescending smile of his. Instead, it was Amber. She stepped into the entryway, glancing around with a forced smile, her heels clicking on the polished floor like the sound of a ticking clock. I didn't say anything at first. She looked at me, then at the papers scattered across the desk. Dad says you've been upset about the house, Amber said, her tone not quite apologetic but more intrigued. Is it really that big of a deal? I felt my chest tighten. She had no idea what was really going on. And yet she stood there, pretending like I wasn't standing on the edge of losing everything. The house is gone, Amber, I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. It was sold without my knowledge. She blinked, as though the weight of my words hadn't hit her yet. But then, a flicker of something passed behind her eyes. Was it guilt? No, it was something colder. Did Richard tell you that? She asked, her voice now laced with a different tone, one I didn't recognize. I nodded, though I had no idea what game she was playing. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. It doesn't matter, I said, trying to stand taller. The house, the property, it's all in someone else's hands now. I'll figure this out. Amber smiled then, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was calculated. I'm sure you will, she said, before turning to leave. I hope it all works out for you, Grandpa, truly. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the sound echoed like a gunshot in my ears. She knew more than she was letting on. And something in my gut told me this wasn't just about a property transfer. No, it was something deeper, something darker. I sat down at the desk and let out a slow, shaky breath. My thoughts were racing faster than I could process them. I needed answers. I needed to get ahead of this. But where could I even start? Richard was gone, no doubt off to play his part in this twisted charade. Amber had already distanced herself, leaving me with a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. The front door opened again. This time, I didn't have to guess who it was. Richard. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, the one that always made him look like he belonged in a boardroom. Not in my house. His expression was unreadable as he stepped into the room. Dad, he said, his voice cold. We need to talk. I stood up, the tension in my chest tightening. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Not with him, not with any of them. Richard, I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain composed. What happened? How could you let this happen? You've betrayed me. This house, my home, it's all gone because of you. He shook his head, his gaze drifting away, as if he couldn't even look me in the eye. It was for the best. Dad, you don't need this place anymore. Amber needs it for her wedding. She's already sent out the invitations. And we needed to make sure everything was taken care of. You don't get to decide that for me. I shot back, my voice rising. This house is mine. It's the last thing I have left of James. I've worked my entire life for this. And now you've sold it out from under me. He took a deep breath, finally looking back at me with a mixture of impatience and pity. It's not about the house, Dad, it's about the future Amber deserves. I blinked, unable to speak for a moment. The future Amber deserves? My own flesh and blood was using me as a pawn in some twisted game. I had spent my whole life sacrificing for this family. And now, I realized, they didn't see me as family at all. They saw me as an obstacle. As Richard turned to leave, I gripped the edge of the desk. The papers scattered in front of me mocking my helplessness. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me, not without a fight. I reached for the phone again. This time, I wasn't calling Richard, I was calling a lawyer. It was time to fight back. Time to make them understand. I might be old, but I still had a few tricks left up my sleeve. The phone rang. I was done being a victim. Yes, I said, my voice firm. I need your help. Immediately. I hadn't expected Richard to show up again so soon. But there he was, standing in my front hall with a face as cold as the marble floors beneath our feet. The tension in the room thickened the moment he walked through the door. Dad, he started, eyes darting around nervously. We need to talk. I resisted the urge to bite back. Talk about what, Richard? How you've sold everything I've ever worked for without so much as a conversation. My voice shook with a calm that didn't match the storm inside me. He sighed deeply, like he was exhausted from playing the game of pretending everything was fine. It's not like that, Dad, you're being dramatic. You'll understand once this is all over. No, Richard, I will not understand. I worked my whole life for this house. You don't just get to decide what happens to it. To me, without my consent. His jaw clenched, and he stepped closer. This house is just an asset. Dad, you're holding on to it like it's your only value. We're trying to make things better. For everyone. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Make things better? By taking everything from me? I took a step back. A wave of nausea rising in my chest. You've been working with Amber and Logan. This isn't about what's best for me. It's about you two having what you want. Richard's face tightened, his eyes flashing with something that almost looked like guilt. But it was gone too quickly to be sure. Look, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. Just trust me. This isn't the way you think it is. You'll get a check, a comfortable place to live. Everything will be fine. Please, just trust me. Trust you? I almost shouted. You're telling me to trust you after everything you've done? You're stealing my life, Richard. He turned, unable to look me in the eye any longer. I'm sorry, Dad, he muttered, as if that would make it all better. I really am. And just like that, he left. No apology that meant anything. No words that could undo the damage. Just another lie in a long string of lies. He couldn't even look me in the eye when he left. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the house like a death knell. I walked into the study, the walls closing in around me. Every picture on the walls seemed to mock me, reminding me of everything I'd lost. The house had always been my sanctuary, the last place that held any semblance of the life James and I had built. And now it was slipping through my fingers. I needed answers. The realtor's call hadn't been enough. Richard's excuses weren't enough. I had to know who else was pulling the strings in this twisted game. The next morning, I called Nolan, a private investigator I'd worked with years ago. Nolan had always been someone I could count on. A man who didn't hesitate to dig into the things people wanted to stay hidden. After a brief exchange, he agreed to meet me in the small cafe down the street, away from the prying eyes of my family. The tension in my chest only worsened as I pulled into the parking lot. There was no sign of Nolan yet, but something about the atmosphere felt wrong. The usual bustle of the neighborhood seemed quieter, more oppressive today. I parked and sat there for a moment, wondering if I was being paranoid. No, I wasn't paranoid. I'd learned long ago that when something felt off, it usually was. I stepped out of the car, scanning the area, looking for any sign of surveillance. A man standing outside a store caught my eye, his posture rigid, his gaze too intent on the sidewalk. As soon as he saw me looking, he turned away, slipping into the alley like he knew I had noticed him. My heart raced as I moved toward the cafe, where Nolan was already seated in the back booth, his face obscured by a newspaper. I sat across from him, keeping my voice low. I need to know everything. Nolan, I don't care what it takes. He glanced over his paper and nodded. I've already started digging. Archer, it's worse than you think. There's a lot of money tied up in this. But it's not just your house. It's your whole estate. Someone has been orchestrating everything. What do you mean, orchestrating? I asked, leaning forward, the cold bitterness creeping into my voice. Who else is involved? Nolan's eyes flickered, and he lowered his voice. Almost a whisper. There's more than one signature involved. It's not just Richard and Amber, there's a third player in all this. Someone with connections. I could feel my chest tightening again. Who? Not just anyone, Nolan said, his voice quiet and tense. Your lawyer, actually, the one you've trusted for years. I froze. Charlie? I barely managed to whisper his name. Nolan nodded, his eyes narrowed. You might want to start asking some questions about him. There are transactions on record that show a significant payout from your estate, made just days ago. The world felt like it was spinning. Charlie, my lawyer, the man I'd trusted with everything, was involved in this scheme? My mind reeled. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything I'd ever worked for. Suddenly, I heard the door to the cafe creak open. I turned my head slightly, instinctively, and locked eyes with a figure standing at the entrance. He didn't belong here, his movements too calculated, his eyes scanning the room too quickly. A man in a black suit, a coldness about him that made my blood run cold. He wasn't looking at Nolan. He was looking at me. I didn't wait. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. We need to go, I whispered to Nolan, but it was already too late. The man was walking toward us, closing in with every step. Get up, I hissed, grabbing his arm and pulling him to his feet. But the man was too close now. I could hear his shoes clicking on the floor. His gaze locked on me like a predator about to strike. Archer Sinclair, he said, his voice low and menacing. You've been asking too many questions. The cafe felt suffocating. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. A slow realization set in. This wasn't just about a house anymore. They were coming for me. The man smiled, and for a moment, I thought I saw the glint of a gun in his jacket. Let's talk. I didn't even have time to react before he was standing right there. The man from the cafe. His dark suit seemed to swallow the light, casting a shadow that made everything feel heavier. My heart pounded against my ribs as I stood frozen, unable to move. You're not going anywhere, Archer. His voice was low, controlled, and far too calm for what was happening. The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of menace. I could feel the tension rising in the pit of my stomach. I had to get out of here, but my legs felt like concrete. The air in the room was stifling, each breath making it harder to think. The door behind me, the one I could run through, suddenly seemed miles away. I hadn't expected it to go this far. But as the seconds ticked by, the feeling of being trapped grew more suffocating. What do you want? I finally forced the words out, my voice shaky but determined. I wasn't going to let him see how much he scared me. I've already lost my house. What else do you think you can take from me? His eyes narrowed, and the faintest smirk crept onto his lips. Oh, Archer, you don't even know the half of it. You should have stopped asking questions a long time ago. I took a step back, silently cursing my own stupidity. How had I missed it? How had I not known that my own son, my own family, would go this far? Richard is behind this, isn't he? I asked, my voice stronger now. I needed to believe that at least some of this could be explained. The betrayal was unbearable, but maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was wrong. The man didn't answer. He just moved closer, his eyes cold, calculating. It's not just Richard, you know. This is bigger than you think. Bigger than any of you ever realized. He took another step toward me. My breath caught in my throat. You've been played from the start. I felt the pressure building, pushing against my chest. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything I had ever worked for. Every ounce of sacrifice I had given to my family. To people who had never truly cared. I had been nothing more than a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. Who else is involved? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's gaze flickered to the door behind me. I followed his eyes, wondering if there was any chance of escape. There was no one around. The streets outside were silent, as if everyone had abandoned me. I was completely alone. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, the sudden noise piercing through the tension in the room. I fumbled with it, hands slick with sweat. It was a text from Nolan. "They're watching you. You're not alone. Be careful." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had known it, of course. The feeling of being watched. Of being trapped in a game where the rules weren't even clear. But to have it confirmed, it was a chilling realization. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, trying to ignore the sense of impending doom creeping up my spine. "Who are you?" I asked, desperate for something. Anything that would make sense of all this. The man didn't flinch. "Does it matter?" he said. "What matters is that you're out of time. The deal's been made, the house is gone, and so are you." The words landed like a punch, and the weight of it hit me all at once. He was right. It was too late. My house, my memories, my life, they were gone. Swept away by a few signatures, a few transactions, a few lies. The realization hit me harder than any betrayal. My own son, my granddaughter, my lawyer, everyone I had trusted had turned against me. But this wasn't just about them. It was about control. Control over me, over everything I held dear. I needed to make a decision. I needed to move. Before I could make a move, the man reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Holding it in front of me, "I think you'll want to see this," he said with a smirk, as if he knew he had already won. "You see, Archer, the truth is, none of this is your fault. But it's certainly your problem." I hesitated, eyeing the envelope. Something about it felt wrong. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to back away, to run, but I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. This had gone too far. I grabbed the envelope, tearing it open. Inside were more documents, more papers I had no intention of looking at least. That's what I told myself. But then something caught my eye. A signature. The name I had trusted. Charlie, my lawyer. It was all falling into place. Everything Nolan had told me. Everything I had feared. It was all real. Charlie had sold me out too. My hands shook as I read the document. A transfer of assets. My assets. To a company I'd never heard of. And a payout. A large payout. I looked up at the man, my stomach turning. This was always about the money, wasn't it? His eyes flickered, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of something. Fear? Guilt? "It's not just about the money, Archer," he said. "It's about power, and you've never had it." Suddenly, I understood. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about the money. This was about control. Whoever was behind this had been pulling strings from the shadows, manipulating everyone around me, using my family, my trust, to get what they wanted. And now they were coming for me. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Someone else was coming. The door slammed open behind me, and I barely had time to react. There, standing in the doorway, was Richard. He looked at me, his face cold, empty, no sign of the son I had once known. Just the man who had betrayed me. "Dad," he said, his voice distant, almost like he didn't care. "You've made things complicated. Now, we need to end this." I didn't have time to think. I lunged for the door. But as my fingers brushed the handle, I heard the man's voice behind me. "It's too late to run now." And just like that, the walls began to close in. The air was thick with tension, and I could barely breathe. Richard's face, cold and empty, was etched into my mind as I watched him walk away. The weight of his betrayal sank in deeper, but it was too late to dwell on it. I had already lost the house, the life I had built. Everything was slipping through my fingers. And now, I could feel the walls closing in. I had to act. I paced the living room, my thoughts racing. How could he do this to me? How could I have missed it? For years, I'd been a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The people I trusted the most, my son, my granddaughter, had been manipulating me, using me, and I hadn't seen it. I didn't know how deep this went, but I knew one thing. I couldn't sit back and let them take everything from me. The house, my home, it was gone. I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the zipper. I had to leave. I had to get out of here before things got worse. But as I moved toward the door, I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't alone. A shadow shifted in the corner of the room. I turned quickly, my pulse spiking. There, standing in the doorway, was the man from the cafe. The one who had warned me. The one who had threatened me. His eyes locked on mine, cold and unblinking. "You really thought you could walk away from this, didn't you?" he said, his voice low and controlled, like he had all the time in the world. I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped further into the room, his shoes clicking against the floor, the sound echoing in the silence. "You're not in control anymore, Archer," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. "This has never been about you. It's about what you have, and what we need." I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about? What do you want?" His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Power, Archer, money, the things that really matter. People like you," he paused, his gaze flicking over me with a sneer, "are just obstacles. The sooner you realize that, the easier it will be for you." I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I stayed quiet. I couldn't let him see how terrified I was. "Who are you working for?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising panic. "Is it Richard, Logan, or someone else?" He tilted his head, a dark glint in his eyes. "Oh, it's bigger than that, Archer, much bigger. You wouldn't even begin to understand." I took another step back, my mind racing. I wasn't getting answers, not yet, but I had to get out of here. I couldn't stay in this house anymore. It was no longer a home, it was a trap. Without thinking, I bolted for the door. But as my hand gripped the handle, a cold voice stopped me. "You can't run from this," he said, his voice sharp, commanding. I froze, my fingers still on the handle, my heart pounding in my ears. "I'm not running," I shot back, "but I'm not going to let you win." The door swung open, and I stepped outside, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away. I had to find a way out. I made it to the driveway, my mind spinning with thoughts of how I could turn this around. I had nothing left. The house, the family, my life. It was all slipping through my fingers. I needed help. I needed to fight back. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I stopped, fumbling to pull it out. A message from Nolan. "I know what they're after, Archer, but you're not alone. Meet me at the old pier at midnight. Come alone." I almost dropped the phone. Midnight, the pier. My mind raced. What did Nolan know, and why did I feel like I was being led into another trap? I didn't have time to think. I had to go. I turned, heading toward my car, when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The street was quiet, eerily so, the kind of silence that made everything feel too still. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts swirling in my mind. "Get it together," I told myself. "Focus, one step at a time." I drove quickly, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The streets blurred as I sped toward the pier, the headlights of my car slicing through the darkness. The world outside felt like it was closing in. I pulled up to the pier just as the clock struck midnight. The sound of the waves crashing against the docks was the only thing that filled the air. The sound eerily calming. I parked and stepped out of the car. Looking around, the shadows seemed to stretch longer here. The darkness swallowing everything. No sign of Nolan. No sign of anyone. My phone buzzed again. I'm here, Archer. Don't trust anyone. I looked around, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't see anyone, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Someone was watching me. A shadow shifted to my left. I whipped around, but no one was there. Then I saw him, Nolan, standing at the end of the pier. His back turned to me. I couldn't see his face, but his body language was tense. I started to move toward him, but before I could take another step, a cold voice echoed from behind me. You're not leaving this place alive, Archer. I spun around. There, standing in the shadows, was the man from the cafe. And the game was only just beginning. The man in the shadows took a slow, deliberate step toward me. I could feel the cold air brush against my skin. But it wasn't the chill of the night. It was the weight of everything that had led me to this moment. The house, the betrayal, the lies, it was all crashing down. And I was standing at the epicenter, feeling more exposed than I ever had before. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white, my heart was pounding, sweat dripped down my back. But I forced myself to stay still, to not give them the satisfaction of seeing how much fear they had instilled in me. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about something deeper, something I wasn't going to lose. My dignity, my agency. The man's voice broke through my thoughts, cold and calm. You thought you could change things, Archer? You thought you could control this? It's too late. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was running out of time. But I didn't need to. I had learned over the past few days that silence was often louder than words. The silence between us, the tension building with every passing second, was my weapon now. You were never meant to win, he continued, taking another step closer. This was always about power. It's too late to fight back. A tight laugh escaped my lips. You think I'm fighting for power? I said, my voice steady now, despite the blood pounding in my ears. I'm fighting for my life. And I'm not going down without a fight. He smirked, almost as if he expected that response. But something in his eyes flickered, just for a second. A shift. I wasn't sure if it was surprise or concern. But I'd seen it, and it gave me the opening I needed. You don't get it, do you? I said, stepping forward, forcing him to meet my gaze. This isn't just about what you want. You've made one fatal mistake. You underestimated me, and you've underestimated what's worth fighting for. In that moment, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just fighting for a house or for revenge anymore. I was fighting for the truth. And the truth wasn't something anyone could steal from me. As he reached for his coat, I noticed a small glint of metal in his hand, a weapon. But before he could pull it out, a shout echoed from the shadows. Don't. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nolan. He was here. His silhouette appeared, framed by the dim light from a street lamp. His face was hard, determined, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. Get away from her, Nolan commanded, his voice firm. The man with the gun paused for a brief moment before pulling the weapon back, clearly unwilling to face Nolan head-on. But Nolan wasn't done yet. He stepped forward, pulling out a small, sleek gun of his own. You thought you were the only one who could play this game, he said. His voice a low, dangerous whisper. You don't know who you're messing with. The man sneered, his gaze flicking between me and Nolan. I could tell he was deciding whether to make a run for it or face us down. But before he could make his choice, a noise from behind us made everyone freeze. The sound of sirens. Damn it, the man muttered under his breath, taking one last look at Nolan and me before disappearing into the darkness. Vanishing as quickly as he'd appeared. The faint echo of his footsteps was the only sign he'd ever been there. Nolan lowered his weapon but didn't relax. We need to talk, he said, his tone softening. I nodded, my breath still coming in sharp gasps. About what? About everything. Nolan stepped forward, his face suddenly somber. There's more to this than you think, Archer. I swallowed. The weight of the last few days crashing down on me. I wasn't sure how much more I could take. But I had no choice but to listen. No more running. No more hiding. Nolan's eyes were grave, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in them. A kind of understanding. Your lawyer, Charlie, he's the one who set this all in motion. My stomach twisted, the realization hitting me like a punch. Charlie? I whispered. No, he couldn't have. He did. Nolan interrupted gently. He's been working with the people pulling the strings from the beginning. He's the one who forged your signature. Who set up the fake transfer of assets. He's the reason everything's been spiraling out of control. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The house. The betrayal. It all made sense now. Charlie, my trusted lawyer, the man who had been my confidant for years, had been manipulating me the entire time. But there was more. Nolan wasn't done. The real reason they wanted your house, Archer, wasn't just for the land. He continued. It was because of the hidden clause in James's will. You were the key. Your inheritance was tied to a trust that could only be activated if the estate was sold, if the family lost control of it. My head spun. I couldn't process the magnitude of it. The family wasn't just after the house. They wanted control of your wealth, of the legacy James left behind. And they were willing to destroy everything to get it. Nolan paused, his gaze never leaving mine. But you stopped them. You fought back when no one else would. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt the weight of what Nolan was saying settle on my shoulders. I wasn't just a victim. I had fought. I had taken back my life. And that was worth more than anything else they had taken from me. The sirens grew louder as the police arrived. Nolan handed me a small envelope. This is your proof. The documents you need to expose Charlie, and everyone else involved. It's all there. I took the envelope, my hands steady now. For the first time in a long while, I felt the strength I thought I had lost. As the officers took charge and the chaos settled, I stood tall. The battle wasn't over, but I had won the first fight, and I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Not ever again. I had my life back, and I was going to hold on to it.